What's up, guys, and welcome back to another one of my videos. Today we will be disassembling and reassembling the Smith Wesson M&P Shield. I'm going to take advantage that I had to break it down to give it a detailed cleaning, so I'm bringing you guys along, showing you how to completely disassemble the M&P Shield and reassemble once you're done. So stay tuned. Alright guys, so as you can probably tell, this gun is in need of service. It is dirty from carrying it. You can tell the stippling is pretty much has like hand grease and all that good stuff in it. So I wanted to take advantage and take this apart. For any of you that are interested in knowing how to detail strip a M&P Shield, can do so, follow along and break it down. I'm doing it with the purpose of detail cleaning it. It's been a while since I've completely torn this one apart. So decided I'd take advantage, show you guys how it's done, and then once I'm done cleaning it, I'll reassemble all together, show you how the reassembly process goes. Alright, so first thing we're gonna do is, as always, remove our magazine, put our slide back, inspect. Our firearm is empty, clear, and safe to work on. Alright, first thing, always no ammunition on your workbench. You don't want live ammo anywhere near your guns while you're working on them. So, first thing you want to do, lock the slide back. Then you're going to use your takedown lever and rotate downwards. You're going to bring down your slide lock. Let the slide go forward, and then since we have a disconnect in the firearm, you're going to want to pull your trigger in a safe direction, and that will disengage the sear, so that way your slide can be removed from your frame. Alright, so let's disassemble the slide first. Alright, first thing you want to do is flip the slide over. You want to get the recoil spring assembly and push it lightly forward and lift up and out. Barrel, you're going to move forward just a tad, lift up and out. Now we're going to remove our striker assembly. To do so, you want to get a punch, and then the striker has a liner right inside that's causing pressure against the back plate. So what you want to do is you want to get your punch, put it right down into that channel, push forward towards your muzzle, and lift your back plate straight up and out of the slide. Put that aside. Now you're going to release your striker channel, right? And then your striker block right down here, once you push it in, you will release the striker assembly and it will come out right out the back. Okay? Remove that guy. Now we're going to set our slide aside. Alright, so for our striker assembly, what you want to do is, I normally use the back of the slide. You put the liner in there just so you give some support to the back of the striker itself, so that way once you pull the spring back, you can take out the retention bushing. But so you guys can see it better on the camera, I'm going to use this little vise. So basically it's the same principle. Instead of just putting it in the back of the slide to give it some support on the back of the striker, you just want to give some support on the back side of the striker right here. Okay, and then as you do so, you want to pull down on the striker spring, and then you can remove the retention bushing from the top of the striker. Okay, and slowly take pressure off. Your striker spring comes out. Now all that's left on the striker is the striker channel guide. Okay, which bring that guy out over here, and then we have our striker return spring towards the back. Okay, and that is our striker completely disassembled. Now we have our slide, the striker block. To remove that, we need to remove the rear sight. So let me get some tools real quick and we will remove the rear sight real quick. Alright, so I got my little hex screw bit on my screwdriver, and the top of the rear sight has a set screw which pretty much just ensures that your rear sight doesn't drift right or left. Alright, so you want to undo that screw. Okay, I'm going to take that screw completely out. Now when you do so, we're going to drift out the rear sight so that way our striker block can be removed from the top. Now under the rear sight on this side, you don't have to completely remove it, you just got to bring it out at least halfway so that way the retention plate and the spring can actually come and lift straight out from the top of the slide. So get yourself a little block, and then we're gonna drift it from right to left just halfway so that way our retention plate and spring can come out and our striker block can come out from the top. Alright, okay, so I'm gonna use my brass dovetail punch. Okay, that will keep it from marring. You can use a sight pusher if you have it. I'm just gonna use the punch, it's quicker for me. These aren't really in there that tight, so I can move it towards the left, get my retaining plate out, get my striker out. So let me get this out real quick and I will be right back. Alright, so we drifted our rear sight to the left, and now as you can tell there is the block plate. So the striker spring blocking plate, you want to get that guy out, set it aside, and then now you can see that there is a striker block spring in there. You want to grab that guy, pull it out, and then it comes out with your striker block. Now we can just remove the spring from the block. That's out. I'm going to remove my rear sight altogether so that way I can clean the whole thing. As you can tell, it's got some little surface rust on it. I'm going to take care of that before we reassemble, and that is clear. Only thing left is our extractor, which has one roll pin going through from top to bottom on the slide itself. Let me get my punch to point that out a little bit better. So there's a roll pin right in there. I don't know if you guys can tell. So that roll pin, I would recommend pushing from the inside outwards, right? Top, and then that will release your extractor and the extractor spring right behind it. So to do so, very easy. You line up your slide, get yourself a punch that fits that roll pin, and you're going to drive it straight down. I'm going to use my little 2-ounce hammer, and we're going to drive that guy straight down and release our extractor. So extractor lifts straight up and out, and then we have our extractor spring towards the rear of the extractor cutout. Bring that guy out, and now our slide is completely disassembled. Alright, that slide. Now let's move on to our frame. Alright guys, so now it's time to take apart our frame. So I picked up my bench just to keep everything organized. All my slide parts are together. Now we're going to take care of the frame. So the first thing you want to do is remove the takedown lever. To do so, there is a cutout in the locking block, which you have to pretty much get your takedown lever to align with that cutout. So to do that, you want to rotate upwards, right? You're going to rotate all the way upward and line up that little cutout with the nipple in the takedown lever, and you want to wiggle that guy right out and out of your frame. I'm gonna put that guy aside. Next, we want to take down our locking block. There's a roll pin right here, and we want to take out the pin that retains our trigger in the frame. So we'll start off with the bigger roll pin for the locking block. Use a punch and drive out our roll pin for our locking block. And then the one for the trigger itself, it's not really that hard. You can push it out with the punch straight out of the gun, and there is your trigger pin. Now when you remove your punch, you want to lift up on your locking block, so straight up, straight up and out, and that will take out your slide stop, and there is a spring right here at the top, which is what gives the tension for your slide stop. Alright, so that's what gives your spring tension on your slide stop. So you can leave that in or you can take it out. Just lift up. Right. You just lift it up and out, and as you can tell, there's a little cutout. It's a little groove cutout in the locking block where that spring corresponds to. There's a little bent spring corresponds to that. Alright, so that's out. Now our trigger itself can be lifted out. Alright, so to do so, you're just going to grab the trigger, pull upwards out the top of your slide, and then pull forward, and your trigger assembly is out. Trigger bar, trigger return spring, and your trigger. Now next, we're gonna remove our rear housing. So our sear housing is a complete assembly. Take that out. We got one roll pin towards the back of the frame. You want to knock that roll pin out, and then our whole assembly will slide right out the top of that frame. So get our block, give it some support, get a roll pin punch, and we're going to drive this guy out. Okay, so we got our roll pin out. Now you want to remove the rear housing. So best way, because they normally are in there tight, get your punch, put it on the rear side of the ear, lift up a tad bit on both sides. That'll give you some leverage to bring this guy out completely, and the whole assembly comes out. Your frame is pretty much stripped. The only thing that's left in your frame is your magazine release, which is easy to take out. All you want to do is get a flathead screwdriver or a punch. I think I can do it with my punch. And inside, I don't know if you guys can tell, there is a spring, a little arm bar. So you want to push up and around it to release the pressure on it, and then you could just slide your magazine catch out of the firearm. Alright, so I got my flathead. So you just want to, I don't know if you guys can see in there, I'm trying to get you guys a better view, but basically you just want to relieve the pressure off of that magazine catch. So you bring that spring up so it can clear the magazine catch itself, and then it comes right out of the firearm. So your frame is completely stripped, nothing's left in there, and now we will tackle our assembly. Alright guys, so this is our rear housing assembly. We have our thumb safety, ejector, sear disconnect, our sear, and that's it. A couple springs in there. So to remove our safety, trying to get a good angle for you guys, to remove our safety, basically you just want to rotate it downwards 90 degrees, right? Rotate. Once it goes 90 degrees, you can just basically take that guy right off. Alright, now for our sear has pressure coming from the bottom of the sear upwards, because there is a spring right below the sear, and we have a pin that goes across, right? So we got a pin that's going across from our housing, and we got a spring right below our sear that gives tension on it to return it, right? To take it out, very easy. You want to push from right to left to take out that pin that retains it, but to do so you got to push down on the sear slightly, because there is tension, as I mentioned before, from the spring pushing up on the sear. So you pull out that pin, your sear retaining pin, and then you want to put your finger on top of the sear, remove your punch, and now your sear comes right out, and your sear has a small little detent. Okay, your sear detent, and your sear spring, sear return spring, right under that.
Just to confirm, no problem, I won't.
Thank you, Siri, for interrupting. Now, next, our ejector, we can just slide forward and out, and then we got our sear disconnect lever, which this guy just literally has one pin going through, no real pressure on there. You pull that guy straight out. Either way, there's not really any direction that you have to go with it, left or right, doesn't matter. Pull out your punch, and then you just bring out your spring, for the sear disconnect lever, and then your lever comes right out, and that is your stripped housing. Now you can take out it's like a little block that gives tension to the safety, right? I don't know what the actual name of it is. I'll look it up and I'll write it down here, but this is basically what gives the tension for our thumb safety. This pretty much push forward, lift outwards. It's literally just a block and a spring. Take these two guys apart and your rear housing is completely stripped down. Now I'm gonna clean up all these parts and I'll be right back to show you guys the reassembly process. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so we're back. I've cleaned and lightly oiled all my parts, so now we're back into the reassembly of things. So we're gonna start with our rear housing. Alright, we're going to put in our little safety block, little tensioning block. I'm gonna get that with the spring and insert in its corresponding spot right here on the left hand side of our rear block in its original groove. Start off spring and we push inwards and down and we seat it into its original position. Alright, next we are going to put in our sear lever. Okay, this one goes in right in that channel inside the rear block. You can put it straight down against the face, and then what pretty much gives tension to it is this little spring right here. So this spring, put it on the punch so that way you can see it. So this spring actually sits like that inside of the block, putting tension against the arm on its side. Now this one is a little bit tricky to get in. My opinion, or from my experience, it's better to push on the edge, push it inwards with a punch, okay, and then just walk it. As you can see, it's there. You want to walk it to align it with the hole right here. Use your punch to straighten it out. Boom. Okay, now we're gonna get the pin. Yeah, it is that one. Okay, and we're going to put the pin right through in the housing to retain everything together. So now our sear disconnector is in place, and we move on to putting in our ejector. Ejector goes on the left hand side of the block. Just slide it in from the front, slide straight back, and it is in place. Okay, next we're going to put in our sear. So sear down in this channel, there's a little hole. Okay, we're going to put in our sear spring. Just use my punch for this. Put our sear spring down into the hole. Then we're going to put the little detent right on top. Next we're going to get our sear. Our sear sits on top with the flat side facing upwards. So flat side facing up with the notch on the right hand side. Right, so we're going to place that right on top of everything. Okay, and then we're going to put in our punch from one end just to line everybody up. Okay, retain it. Then we're going to flip it around, and then we have our sear pin, which has a flat sided head on the top, and it has a cutout right here. Back this out a little, but as you can see, the head lies in that recess right there. So what you want to do is put some downward pressure on the sear and then walk that pin right through so it's flush, as you can see, flush. And that pin actually helps retain the ejector in place as well. We want to test out our sear disconnect by bringing it down, and it should bring the sear up. So it's disconnecting the sear. Alright, so our sear disconnect is working properly. See it travel up and down. So that's done. Next, we're going to put in our thumb safety. So there is a cutout on the right hand side towards the bottom right here, and we're going to put this leg of the safety down in that channel, swing it through, remember 90 degrees facing up, okay, and then you just want to rotate it in place, and she is good to go. So that is our rear housing completely assembled. Now we move on to our frame. Our frame, as you can tell, nice and clean. Alright, so I want to start off by putting our magazine catch back in the frame. Okay, I am a righty, so got to make sure that button is facing the right. It'll be like this, coming from the left, push it through. I gotta get that spring out of the way with my flathead so I can get my mag release to clear it. Bear with me. Alright, so we got that there. Alright, now magazine release is in place. Now we want to give it tension, so down inside, trying to get a good angle. This spring right here, we want to move it into that channel to give it spring tension. And now we have a functioning mag release. Alright, let's go with our locking block. Put in our slide stop spring into the corresponding channel. So I'm going to start it up top. This does have a little spring tension to it, so you want to start the tail into the top end, and we put in our slide stop. Okay, so that assembly's done. Okay, next we're going to get our trigger and trigger bar. We're going to put our trigger return spring through the eyelet of the trigger bar. There we go. Okay, so that will line up as soon as we put it into our frame. The eyelet for that spring lines up with our trigger hole right there, so we can put our pin through. Alright, let's assemble our striker. So we have our striker spring, striker retaining bushing, our liner, return spring, insert return spring, striker through, get our guide, and push that guy through. There we go. Alright, so that is how that goes. Spring, guide. Next we're going to get our striker spring, put that through, and here is where we use our little vise again, just to give a downward pressure to keep our spring in place. Gonna get our guide, and we're gonna go down just enough to get our guide on it and retain our spring. So now our assembly is complete and we move on. Alright, so frame, want to put in the rear housing straight down, right down into that channel. You see there's a little nipple which corresponds to that little cutout right there. So you want to go straight down on it, right? There's a little guide right there, straight down and in place. We're gonna get our rear roll pin, get that guy in there, and little 2-ounce hammer. We're gonna run and then completely seat it with our punch so it's flush, and we're even on both ends. Alright, next we're going to get our trigger. Now the trigger has a finger in the rear which engages the sear, right? So that finger, you want to put it inside. Let's see if I can give you a better angle. Inside this channel on the left hand side or right hand side of the firearm, left hand muzzle facing you. Okay, so basically put finger in our housing, trigger down into the channel, and now we want to line up our locking block and slide lock straight down on our frame. Okay, next we need to insert our trigger pivot pin. Okay, goes in from right to left because it does have a flat head on one end right here, which corresponds to the cutout in the frame right here, because the other side does not have a cutout, so only goes in one way. The easiest way is to capture your trigger spring. Okay, so you want to go in this way. Sorry about that, guys. Put your pin in, get that started. Our spring is captured by our pivot pin. We try our trigger, returns properly, we are good. If we put up our sear disconnect, it should give movement to the sear, as you can see. So we are good. Next, we're going to put in our front roll pin to lock in our locking block. Same process, start the roll pin by hand, and we finish up by completely seating it with our punch. Make it flush with the frame. Now that we're flush, we want to get our takedown lever. So as I mentioned before, the takedown lever has a little nipple right here, or protrusion, that corresponds to the protrusion in the locking block on both sides, right here on this edge. So to start it off, you got to line those two up. Alright, so you're at this position, and then you want to rotate towards the back, same position back here, and completely seat it. Now you can rotate down, and your frame is completely assembled. So now we move on to our slide. Alright, so next we have our slide, clean and oiled. We're going to start off by putting in our extractor spring, the little channel right here, the rear of the slide. There's a hole. Want to put in your spring and our extractor. So the extractor does have a little lip on it, so you're gonna have to go in, over, and then slide it on it. Now when you're pushing that roll pin through, you have to put some inward pressure. Alright, so you push inward to drive that roll pin down. So get our little 2-ounce hammer, and we start off pushing it down, a couple taps. Now we can actually drive it home flush with the slide. Alright, so our extractor is in place. Next, we want to put in our striker stop. Drop that into the hole. We got the spring, goes right on top. And then we have the retaining plate, which goes on top of that. Okay. Rear sight, got to push it in. And once you get to this position over here, you got to bring down that plate, push it down, so you can get that sight move over on top of the plate and retains everything. So stay tuned. I'm going to drift that sight back to its spot, and then we'll continue. Alright, so we got our sight back in place, retaining our striker block. As you can see, it moves freely. Now we just tighten up our set screw on top of the sight just to retain it from drifting. Okay. Next, we're going to insert our striker. So you start it off from the rear, push it forward. Once you hit the stop, you got to push down on the striker block and finish pushing forward enough. Next, you get your end plate. Start off at the channel, and then with a punch, you want to push that liner inward to override our plate, so our plate can slide completely down. So we push inward and the plate down at the same time, and we are in place. So now we are retained, and all that's left is our barrel. Okay, so barrel, slide in and back, and our guide rod, slide in, and into its cutout. Alright, now we can just mate both sides together, slide to frame, run it all the way back, lock the slide back, rotate our takedown lever, and release the slide. And we are good to go. Well guys, that brings us to the end of our video. I hope you enjoyed the process of disassembly and reassembly on the Smith & Wesson Shield. As always, I will leave links down below for all the tools and equipment that we use on these videos. If you liked the video, please consider hitting the thumbs up, hitting the little subscribe button and the bell, just so YouTube lets you know when new videos are released. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.